So the next question is on private investment. So another way to finance infrastructure is through private investment. That could be a public-private partnership, often called a PPP. So all our viewers are on the same page about what a PPP is. Vinny, could you please explain that in plain terms, how they work, comparing to non-PPP or public models?
Sure. I think the first thing is to remember that PPP is a procurement model. It's not a financing model. I think if you went and asked an uninformed member of the public about what their favorite procurement model is, they might look at you blankly. But then if you ask them what they think about PPPs, there'd be a lot of emotion. And it's always confused me that there's a lot of emotion in this. People seem to either love them or hate them, which isn't an amount of passion that's given to alliances or design builds or early contractor involvement, all of which are also models of procurement. Taking it back to the school example that Kelly talked about earlier, in traditional, so non-PPP procurement, if the government wanted to build a new school, it would go out and hire a design firm, design the school. It would take that design out to market and get a quote from contractors to build the school. It would often pick the lowest price, although there's been a move towards price quality recently. Following construction, the government would hire a firm to maintain the asset through its life. If something was to go wrong with that asset a decade or so into its life, in case of, for example, leaky schools, which we've had some experience with here, there would be little ability to seek recourse from any of the private parties that were involved in that project earlier on. That's something called interface risk. Every time you have a contract handover from one party to another, you create an interface, and in that case, the government holds those interfaces. In the PPP example, the government would go out to market for one consortium to design, build, and maintain that school. And because no payment will be made to that consortium until the school's complete, they must raise private finance to pay for the design and construction phase. Once the school's built, payment to both repay the private finance and pay the ongoing maintenance costs is made based on the availability and performance of that school. If there's an issue with the school through its life, if it's unavailable, or if the performance measures, the predefined performance measures aren't met, then the government has the ability to withhold payment. I think like all procurement models, there's a toolbox, and PPPs aren't right for every project. But if we do look at the unique attributes of projects, the unique attributes of the market we have, the different owners, we can deliver them in a way that has the ability to bring significant benefits, particularly to the end users, in this case, the students in that school.
Thanks, Vinny. Can I ask our other panelists for any very quick reflections, as we're already a little pressed for time, before we move on to our last question before the audience Q&A?
I could make a quick comment. So I, in the report, made a big effort to try and get to the bottom of what the various international research said on PPPs, because there's so much division. I was really fascinated to know what the research and evidence actually said. And it was, as I said before, surprisingly thin on the ground in terms of really good quality independent evidence. But the research was really clear that PPPs do save a lot of money on cost and time overruns, really significant amounts in some cases. And one of the reasons for that is that private partners don't get paid until they complete the contract to a required standard, and meanwhile they have the requirement to be paying back the money that they've financed. So they're in huge trouble if they don't get it done on time, so they'll pull out all the stops to do that. The other argument about PPPs, or that people say is good about PPPs, is that they provide value for money throughout the lifetime of the project, and Vinny just talked about that. Unfortunately, the research on that is not super great in terms of, there's not clear evidence out there one way or another that they definitely cost the similar amount but provide a better service, for example. And so one of the report's findings was that we really need better research, not just about PPP models, but also other procurement models as well, just to really get to the bottom of what's best and what's best in which situation, and what are the drawbacks and the advantages of each type of model. And yeah, I think because PPPs can be really long-term contracts, they have sort of unique risks, and we need to be really aware of that, and we need to be really careful that we have great capacity and capability in government to be able to manage those really quite complex projects, and just that we also really careful that we learn from all the experiences that other countries have had overseas. That they can go spectacularly wrong. Other forms of procurement can also go spectacularly wrong. I don't think that's necessarily just limited to PPPs, but I think we need to just make sure we learn from prior mistakes, and that we also do really good research on them as well.